Hey guys, welcome to the part 1 of the Calculate Client Security Hash. And again, before you go on this video, make sure that you have your orchestrator configured because if not, you will be facing a lot of troubles and challenges and problems. So again, make sure to configure that. I have a video on how to do that. Make sure that you are able to follow that correctly and your orchestrator setting should be in a connected and licensed status unless you will not be able to proceed on this part. Okay, so to get started, you need to download this guide that the UiPath prepare for us to follow and complete this exercise. So go ahead and click that link. All right, so here in this document, we'll have to follow all the instruction in here. So the first thing that stated in here is to create a REFramework template. So I will not go I will not scrape this document anymore. So I'll just go ahead and demonstrate to you how to work on this activity. So make sure to open your UiPath Studio and then we need to create a new RE framework, so that's not a process or not anything in here except for robotic enterprise framework. This is the only component we need to, or this is the template that we need to use in this activity. So go ahead and click that. Alright, so after you click that, you will be required to name this bot. So it would be better if we name it accurate with the name of this exercise. So that should be calculate client security hash. So let's add a bot. And then if you want to put any description, so make sure to add that in here. And after you completed that, just hit this create button. Okay, so wait until the project has been loaded completely. So as you can see in here, this is something new with the UiPath Studio. They added some shortcuts so you can manage this UiPath environment much easily. So or more easily. So and here we also have here this one, the debug and run. Later I will explain to you uh, what's new on here. And so to start on here, we need to go to the main activity. So make sure to activate that activity or that workflow rather. Then the first thing that we need to do in here is to look for the transaction item variable. So go in here, the variable, and make sure to activate this general business process workflow and look for the transaction item variable. So we need to have this change from the QueueItem because that's the default variable type to DataRow. So to do that, just click in here. And if you were not able to find the DataRow variable type, just click this browse for types. And then here search the DataRow. So this that should be this first item in here. And then you can see here now that we have the transaction item variable type updated into the data row. And after you do that, you will be having errors in your main workflows. One in the get transaction data, process transaction, and some other workflow inside this main workflow. So before we go and fix that error, the next thing that we need to do is open our config file. So to open the config file, we can go on this icon, click this File Explorer icon, and then go to the data. And now you will have this config worksheet. So open that. Okay, so here you will be the default page will be the setting, and now you have a default value for the orchestrator queue name and the lag business process name. So let me just remove this row, this blank row. Then we need to add three special rows in here that we need for the rest of the activity. So the first one is the system1 URL. The next one is the SHA1 online URL. And the third one will be the system1 credential. Right? Now let's put the value of that item. So for the system1 URL, it should be acme.test.uipath.com. Then for the SHA1, it should be sha1-online.com. And then for the system1 credential, we'll need to create this one later. So I think the value we can use here is the ACME credential. So if you put a different value in here, make sure to remember that later once you are creating an asset. And before we proceed further, make sure that you already have an account on the ACME System 1. So to check that, you'll need to navigate to the ACME System 1 URL. So that should be okay. So if you already have an account, just use your email and password. It's a different account. It's not the same with your login to the UiPath Academy. So if you don't have an account yet, you can register in here. Just provide the same email ID you are using on the Academy. Make sure that's the same. Don't use other email ID. Again, make sure that the email you will be using in here is the same with the email ID you are using to log in on your UiPath RPA Academy. Because if not, you will be having problem on the submission of the exercises. So for example, on my case, my email is happycodinginlife@gmail.com, and then you can provide password in here. And once you complete these fields, just hit the register button. Okay, so once you have an account, the next thing or the next step that we need to do is to create an asset or credential asset. So go to the orchestrator page, go to the asset page, and now we need to add a new asset. So to do that, we need to click this add button and provide an asset name. So again, make sure that the value you provide in here should be the same with the asset name you will put in here. So in my case, that's Acme credential. So for the type, it should be a credential. Again, a credential, not text, not bold, not integer. So you can provide a description, that's only optional. And now you can put here your username. So I hope that I can still remember my correct password. Oh no. Yeah, wait, let me check if I remember it correctly. Correct, that's correct. So after you have that populated username and password, hit this create button. And now you have a one asset, which should be for the ACME credential. So that's the credential we will be using later on the automation process to log in on this ACME System 1 application. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is go back to your config file, go to the constant page, and make sure to set the max retry number to the value of 2. And after you have that completed, just save this file. And now we can close that. Okay, so here in our UI Path Studio again, we have error after we had an error after we changed the variable type of transaction item data row. Again, the main reason why we change it to data row is because we will be not utilizing the queue in here. We will use directly the data that we will capture from the ACME System 1 data or system. So the first workflow that we need to fix in here is the get transaction data, that XML. So we need to go on that XML. You can go on the framework and look for get transaction data, that XML, and go to the arguments. Now you can see in here that the out transaction item is still with a QueueItem argument type. So we need to change that to data row. And since we will not be using Orchestrator queue in this exercise, we can now delete this. So after you do that, save the changes and close that XML. Now here in the main activity, go inside or double click inside this get transaction data workflow, and here in the import argument, click that and look for the transaction item. So it should be good now. Our transaction item is now data row. So we need to put a default value in here. So that should be equal to the transaction item variable. So after you assign that, hit OK. And then we need to explore what are the other errors that we have in here. So let's check this catches port. So as long as you can see this icon in the workflow, it means that there is still an error inside. So we need to find that out. So here we have a one, so double click on that, and then here if you can see an error like this, so you just only need to remove that value, click outside the workflow, go back again on that field and just type the same value, hit enter and click outside on the activity, and now you can see that the error is gone. So let's go back on the get transaction data. Now you can see that we no longer have an error on this workflow. So here we still have one. So the same in here, you just need to delete the value, click outside the activity, go back again and type the same value. I'm not sure why UiPath is still not fixing that. And let's see. Okay, I think we're able to fix all the error that we have on this workflow. So make sure to save that. And then now you can see that we're good now on the get transaction data workflow. Now the next step is to go to dprocess.xml. So go ahead and click this one. Now here on the argument, you can see that the argument type of the transaction item is still QueueItem. So again, same, we need to change that to DataRow. So after you change that, hit the save button. Now we need to go back to the main workflow. Here, go here, click inside this workflow. And so here on the import arguments, click that. And now let's assign the transaction item variable and hit OK. So as you can see, we no longer have an error in that. And then the next step is to go on the set transaction.xml. So find this one that's under the framework folder, activate that workflow. And here on the argument, we need to change this to the data row. And after you do that, you can see that you will have error on these three activities. But since we no longer need these activities, we can just delete this. And make sure to save the changes. So after you do that, we need to go back to the process transaction. And here on the right, let me expand this again. Here on the final state, we need to click this import argument of the set transaction status. And okay, where is that? Here we need to change this to transaction item. So after you do that, hit this OK button and should be good now. So make sure to save the changes and go to the main workflow, and you should no longer have any error right now. Wait, let me see if we still have the validate in here. Where can I find that in here? Report there's a validate button so you can check if you have error. I can't find it. Where is that? Oh, I think this is that. So let's try this. There are plenty of options now. So let's try validate project. Okay, so now there's no error found so far. So that's the first thing that you need to do before we get started is to configure your main workflow. Make sure to change the transaction item variable type from QueueItem into DataRow because again, we will not be using the orchestrator queue. Okay, so I think that's all for this one. Then we'll see you again on the next one for the continuation of this tutorial.